Yeah, so we're in week 3 of this now. Remember, there were multiple sections of this, but we're going to skip a couple of them, thankfully. And I've gone through and tried to edit them as best I could also. And do I need to be recording or is somebody else recording too?
You and I are both recording, so
Oh, okay.
we
So I
should
did
we
start that
should
then.
have
Yeah.
backup. Yep.
Sorry, guys. My brain's just not functioning today.
Yeah.
It's one of those
No,
things.
so I think for me at least, the research is some of the meatier stuff that relates to, our interests. So I
Mhm.
think it was good taking 2 weeks to talk about that. And then
Yeah.
now we can talk a little bit about, their comments on companies' growth and startups and some of the other
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to start on what's going on in industry, of course, and that's we'll see. There's a lot of overlap, into the political arena and things like that. At least as their viewpoint of it. The big thing, that they think is having, everybody's saying AGI is going to happen and this and that, but as I highlighted there, nobody knows quite what it means, but it's provocative. It gets people going, right? So we are all seeing AGI, right? It's going to take care of everything, and Meta Labs is, spending all this money on it, and various other companies. So we'll see this as kind of like a theme as we go along here. Actually, let's do this. Yeah. Okay, let's get it in slideshow mode, and we'll be able to go in. One of the big things they talk about is there's kind of this more for less. We're getting more now for less money, less time, less tokens, whatever you want to call it, than we were before. And it says the absolute capacities are highlighted there by flagship models continue to climb reliably while prices fall, which is a good thing, right? We're not spending as much to do these things. And you can see they've got all the big ones there kind of, and they've got this kind of bizarre artificial analysis intelligence to price ratio. I'm just going to treat that like bang for buck. I don't know what exactly they mean by it, but essentially, we're getting more bang for buck than we used to. Shouldn't be any surprise for us, right?
Yeah, it's hard to understand, isn't it, Jerry? What is the scale on the intelligence side?
Yeah, I think it's a made up metric, Roger.
Yeah.
They just had to have something that has.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
The thing
go ahead.
I've been seeing, and I don't know how much more accurate this is, but it seems to make some sense, is the cost using the cost of 1 million tokens
Mhm.
as and divided by context window. So I've seen that ratio as sort of like a function,
Mhm.
and I, put it into presentations for business people that are buying our stuff, and it seems to resonate as something understandable, right? Because people understand a context window, or are gaining greater understanding of a context window, 1 million or 500,000 or 100,000, whatever, and then how many tokens you get for from a price point, right? So
Mhm.
I've seen that, and I think it's a little more digestible than because I think the problem with this is like these models are so radically different from each other.
Right.
So what
Yeah.
are you really measuring? It's like comparing. Like imagine they're comparing cars from little go-karts, golf carts to F1s in a
Yeah.
ratio, right? Like it's sort of like, yes, four-wheel mobility is definitely radically changed, but it doesn't really tell you a lot. Whereas I don't know. So hopefully that made some sense, like the token to
No.
context window price
Yeah.
ratio. So
It makes sense.
anyway.
Aaron, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's easy to understand and it's objective measure, but it doesn't tie back to an intelligence to price ratio.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I
so
don't know if we have a standard of the definition of intelligence all the way back to the AGI
Yeah. Yeah.
alien invasion through,
Yeah.
like what, like we just don't have a way to measure that. I don't think,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
Yeah, so I think the key concept here is that we're seeing more of these reasoning models that average a lot more tokens to answer your questions. So that's why they didn't want to just show unscaled price per million tokens. Okay. So along the lines of what Aaron was saying, it's really price per million tokens divided by the average length of a response, but there is no quite super easy way to calculate that. And the context window size is not necessarily proportional to the average length of the response. But that's what this intelligence capability, if done right, is supposed to encapsulate is if it's now using 4 times as many tokens to give you the same answer, then it doesn't matter if the tokens are 4 times cheaper, you're still paying the same price.
That's a great point, actually. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing on this chart, also another interesting thing is the doubling time over there. This is showing I don't know what we're doubling, but it's getting cheaper all the time. And
everything's amazing. We just don't know what it means.
Yeah. But if we are getting double performance in whatever performance is, right? We don't know. But in 3 to 5 months, that is some nice progress for those of us that, all of us that work in this kind of area. So,
well, the key takeaway there is whatever the ratio is, whatever the curve is, Google is doubling more quickly than OpenAI.
Yeah.
Although it's from this data set, the data set's pretty noisy. It's a little bit hard to see that, but
yeah. Kind of wishing up.
One last point I'll make real quick. What would be interesting is understanding like a TPU ratio, because Google, these are their own chips. So if you had some kind of like TPU density to value, right, that would be actually pretty interesting, because then you could start it would almost be like old school traditional like Unix benchmarks, like on hardware.
Yeah, but I think this is more they're trying to be hardware agnostic, if you will, and more just relative performance. At least I'm kind of interpreting it that way. But obviously they can do what they can. I mean, Google has kind of its own black box, right, with their TPUs and things like that, and their services run inside those, which has its own things. I think we get to that a little bit later. All right, I'm going to move on. So I thought the title, Model Cadence and Fundraising, 2 peas in a pod. Kind of is that, right? Everybody's out, unless you're one of the real big guys, the Googles or the even a Microsoft or something like that. You're out fundraising for money, and that kind of does become kind of I would call it a gate, but something that you have to watch, And I think the general theme I got through all of this section was that this is, we're techie type people. Well, a number of us are techie type people, and other people are not. But it is switching to a real, honest to God business with business metrics. Okay, so I think that's what you guys tell me if you think that that's what you're seeing through these slides too. But that's giving away what my 2 cents is on this. Let's see. All right, and I think this creates a predictable cadence, which interconnects the roadmaps of prior AI labs. So I think a lot of this section has to deal with people trying to put some sort of metrics around it that they can say, these guys are doing better than the other guys, or these guys are faster, or whatever. So if we were investing money, where should we put the money type thing? So you'll tend to see all these things talk about deals and Series E type things and Series F and things like that. Okay. Well, here's the bottom line. AI first companies are now generating tens of billions of dollars of revenue per year, which is good. I mean, that's good for all of us, right? It means that things will keep going. And you can kind of look at that chart there. I don't know what the units are on these, if these are total, like the chart on the bottom, kind of not the bar chart, but the stacked graph, where it shows the OpenAI is now at, what, 13 billion? I don't know if that's what they did in July-ish timeframe or that's the total. My guess is it's not the total. They may be actually doing that much in that time frame, but things are going up at a rapid pace, which is good for all of us that kind of work in this space. The other thing that I thought that was interesting with this other bar chart on the right-hand side, where it's showing consumer versus enterprise, and the numbers for consumer were that high. I'm kind of surprised at that, and sort of not surprised at that. What does anybody else think about that?
What are the units?
I believe these are in millions, so these are billions.
Million. Is that total revenue, consumer revenue, or what is that?
Well, this is showing quartiles, right? Bottom quartile, median, and then the top quartile. But
everybody is still cash negative. So that's the issue with the technology right now. Even if this is tens of billions, nobody's, Anthropic was saying 2027 to be cash positive. And figure the same thing probably with the other ones too.
Yeah. But it is getting better. The picture is getting better. I guess it's going in the right direction. So we'll see. Okay. And then this thing where it's, we're starting to move into the commercial sort of issue. And now the metrics that you're starting to see are starting to be more businessy, I guess, as I will say. It's kind of out of the hands of a lot of developers and lab type people, and now the business people are starting to do various things here. And we're also seeing, I thought this center graph here where it says AI products are getting stickier in the enterprise, I think we've reached the point where that's just going to happen. We're going to see all these AI products just continue to move, continue to penetrate, things like that. And unfortunately, probably continue to displace people. I know somebody that happens to work for Amazon, and they lost their position, and they were replaced by AI, for that sort of thing.
Even in healthcare with this is that they're using LLMs everywhere except for where they can't. So that would be like clinical trial protocols, patient data. And I watched a couple of these seminars, and it's basically like they're fully adopted with LLMs now, like RAG workflows. And I thought it would just be a minor thing, but it's like medical is like one of the faster moving industries right now.
That's really, I worked in kind of drug discovery and drug production, and that's really surprising to me because medical always tended to be rather conservative. I don't know if that's the right term, Kevin, but where I'm going with that, right? But
yeah, I was watching a whole panel, and all 3 or 4 people said the same thing. Like fully adopted, because they got a question: are you guys fully embracing generative AI? And they all said, yeah. But there's limitations because they can't upload a protocol to ChatGPT, and obviously anything that's related to patients and current trials, they can't do. But they just couldn't stop talking about their LLM workflows.
Is that that is surprising to me, having a little bit of background in that world. But it's great for them, I guess, and great for people like yourself, Kevin, that kind of have a foot in both camps, if you will.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And there was a podcaster that said the same thing. They said, yeah, it's surprising how medical has outstripped other fields in innovation with LLMs.
Yeah. Does this surprise you at all? I mean, you've probably looked at the medical field a lot longer than I have.
I have a different perspective because I've published 20 papers and I share a lot. So I think I played a part of it. And it surprises me still because everything tends to be slow anyway.
Yeah. That's my viewpoint of medical. The whole medical industry is it's like, we test to test for the sake of testing. You know what I mean? I don't know if you, but I mean, it just seems like they're like overly cautious, which I understand, which is good because of the liability issues and things like that. But to see them embrace what is a newer technology so strongly is just interesting.
Yeah, this Aaron. My
Hey,
take
Aaron.
is that we're crossing into this. You know, the best analogy I have is sort of like Microsoft Office phase.
Mm.
You know, like if you guys remember, well, those of us here that are at least probably in our 50s to 60s, you
That's
know,
me.
kind of yep, that's me too. That would remember that, that in the 90s, right, when, you know, because in the 80s, these were separate applications, separate apps, right, and then Microsoft bundled, and then the thing just exploded, right, like everyone got Office, like even, I mean, people who didn't need Office, right, secretary level, administrators, like in warehouses, kids, I mean, it was just like shoved everywhere.
Right.
You know, and we could have been these like very risk oriented, you know, type people back then. We just would have been like overrun by the Greenland, you know, 2 tsunami 1,000-meter wave, right? Like it was just happening. And,
Yeah.
you know, I had to give homage to likely the worst movie of the year, probably coming up. But I think there's something to that right now,
Yeah.
that this thing has just gone, you know, kind of over the top, um, you know, when it comes to just it's ubiquity, right? Like we've gone to ubiquitous deployment, um, you know, and it's gone to that sort of everywhere zone. And at this point, it seems, I mean, this is either companies are burying bad outcomes, which I'm less likely believing, and versus people are being just a little more careful, and the firms are better than they were a couple years ago at hallucinogenic outcomes, and people are just getting, you know, better at using them. And so, you know, that's sort of my take, is that, because stuff people were saying a year ago or 2 years ago, you know, about we're not going to get, you know, 50 licenses of this or 500 of that or whatever, they're just not saying that anymore, right? I mean,
Yeah.
companies are just, you know, buying it basically.
And I
Yeah.
will say this too, is that regulatory agencies like FDA are leading the way because of the administration. Our current administration loves LLMs and wants to see it in many applications. And they're having like competitions within FDA of, I think it would be, you know, researcher versus researcher who gets best results. I just had a big competition paper myself. But they're more progressive than other places, other let's just say medical companies that do coding. I know one in town here, and they're not progressive with LLMs, and their regulator is more progressive than the companies. So some companies will, I think, suffer the transition.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting that the regulators are ahead of the manufacturers and labs and things. So, okay, I'm going to move us on from that, but that was great insight from, you know, Aaron and Kevin and everybody on that. Thanks a lot, guys. Okay. However, they continue to contend that OpenAI still maintains a strong lead. I suppose that's trouble. It's true. I'm sorry. But I thought this was interesting. If it's kind of cut off here, it says ramp customers exhibited a strong proclivity for OpenAI models, 36%, followed by Anthropic. Meanwhile, there's very little usage of Google, DeepSeek, and things like that. This is like October-ish, maybe earlier, even late summer type data, I think. And I'm wondering if that, and they have a nice picture here showing this, but I'm wondering if that picture is changing. And DeepSeek, it's hard to say who's really using it. I don't know how they account for that.
And one question I have in OpenAI, are they combining Microsoft Copilot with that too? Or are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is here, share of U.S. businesses with paid subscription to AI models, platforms, and tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, First, it's US
I know
only.
everyone who is Google, if they have any, like, if they're using Google Workspace, right? Like, they're using Gemini, right? Obviously, because it's
Yes.
basically bundled with it. Um, so I kind of don't buy that percentage, because we know the percentage of, especially small to mid-sized enterprises, which are, where most Google friendly workspace customers are. So that's, that's a lot of businesses, right? That's, got to be hundreds of thousands around the world, and tens of thousands in the United States. So a huge percentage of them are using Gemini. And then obviously Microsoft is everywhere in any enterprise. So that's Copilot. I don't know anyone who has Microsoft that isn't Copilot.
Yeah.
I actually think that number's low.
Yeah.
35%, if that's including Copilot.
Okay.
Yeah, because so I don't know how many of you have ever gone through licensing, like enterprise licensing, but Microsoft, all the vendors, they'll do these EULAs, right? These universal license agreements, or ELAs, enterprise license agreements. And everyone is just re-signing their ELAs with Copilot, or with all these tools, right? I mean, obviously they're updating them so that they can get, the same existing seats access to these tools, or some large percentage of the same seats.
Maybe that explains why Microsoft stock has been doing quite well in the last relative period and things like that. If they're getting a lot of license sign up, that was always a big thing. When I worked there as a contractor, was, they'd come in and give us a little dog and pony show about how many people that signed up for. I was on the Office team, so it was, how many people bought an Office license, and how many bought any of these competitor ones. We were like freaking out because we only had like 97.5% of the market or something
Market
like
share,
that.
There you go.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you guys got to work harder. You got to put some new features in there.
But I mean, that's like a fair point, which is, I don't know. I mean, you're going to have to try to buy a non-Copilot based Office probably within a year. Like, they won't even probably sell it, especially Office 365. Like, it'll have to be like a special one for education, or some very limited. I mean, I don't even know, that'd probably be it, like K-12 or something.
Because they can't afford to throw the resources against a one-off type thing,
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, especially given Microsoft's scale, right? Like, it's not like a little company doing, a few thousand, customers in a secondary product. It's like their secondary products could be like tens of millions of users, right? So, so I I don't know about those numbers. Let's just put it that way. I kind of find those a little weird.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too. They just seem a little either old, or maybe that their index is looking at something that is incomplete.
Yeah, or maybe they're measuring, the, what I would call like LLM, even though they're not really server count, but the use of LLMs versus seats, versus end user seats.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's not enough on this slide to give us any more detail on the metric, So I'm going to move along then. Okay, so we're going to move out of that a little bit and move into the audio visual image generation. And this is good though. Audio avatar image generation companies are seeing their revenues accelerate wildly. And you can see the players and things like 11 Labs, and I'm not familiar with Cynthia or Black Forest Lab, but I am familiar with 11 Labs, and they've kind of kicked ass in that space here and things like that. And I'm if I were a Hollywood actor and getting a little old, I kind of wonder, maybe I should license my image to one of these companies or something like that, rather than try to compete with them head on or something like that. Anyway, that sort of thing. Any thoughts on that? I mean, I think this is just going to continue to grow. Very, very high revenues. Okay. And then Google says they're doing well on their sort of stuff, or at least these guys say Google is doing well with that. Google has a slight advantage. One advantage I think they have is they have their own TPUs, so they control the silicon that drives their cloud. So they create the silicon, they have their own foundries, they have, all of whatever else they need to, so they can, not have to be beholding as much to NVIDIA. So I think if they do well, it's going to be because they, it's an in-house sort of thing. And that was something they started, a decade plus ago, that they wanted to have everything in-house and have total control from SAN to compute. So that may be a winning strategy for them. Okay. And then we're going to move kind of on. I actually went through this. I have skipped probably 40 slides by now, guys. So if this is a little jerky, I apologize, but a lot of it's very repetitive. Models are getting seriously good at coding, and they say OpenAI is pulling ahead. I don't have enough expertise. Anybody else have any thoughts as to whether, GPT-5 is the thing to use if you were going to do coding type work or not?
My it factor with all these is how hard it wants to work for you. So right now, that's Sonnet and Opus for me. Like I say, give me this, my notebook plus 6 deliverables, like 6 FDA documents. That's the type of stuff it's doing. So I'm not finding the same thing on inference providers or OpenAI or Gemini 3. Seem more like Gemini 2.5 Pro in terms of how much output it wants to give you.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate that since I'm not really looking in the space.
Yeah, and I guess, are we defining, like, it's not clear to me what we're defining when we say coding, because there seems to be so much, whatever you want to call it, they call it vibe coding or whatever, there's low code, no code type action, which a lot of these other tools like Cursor and others that, everyone I know is using those, lovable, whatever, 5 or 10 of these types of tools. I don't know anyone that's like writing hardcore C drivers, for embedded systems using any of this. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's like my test case for this stuff is like, are Qualcomm engineers doing communications IPC programming with semaphores using this, right? Like, because that's what it is. Like, that's the real world, like, embedded devices type stuff. And I haven't seen, much of anything in that at all.
Yeah, but that space tends to move pretty slow too, though, right? It always traditionally
because everything has to work.
And it has to work like, not 99% of the time, like 99.9, you gotta have like 5-6 digits, nines on the end of that.
Yeah, 10 nines,
yeah. You're way out beyond 5 nines, and that sort of thing. Because you take down like, network routing, that's kind of a bad thing,
Yeah, or MRI machine.
Yeah. We've seen we know what can happen.
Who wants to be, like, what's his name? Musk is always out there like, you're going to be an idiot if you get regular surgery in 5 years or something. It's like, who wants an MRI machine that was like vibe coded, right? Like, I don't know if I want that.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, I'm going to move us on again. And I love this slide. As costs racked up, it's unclear who is making money. So that they say they're making, I got all this money coming in, but it's like, how much you spending on the thing, to keep this all going and keep all these engineers fed. And, there's like hiring wars and things like that. I've just got to think right now, essentially, they're spending way too much. I heard Zuckerberg had some issues and things like that. Oh, do we have somebody drawing on the screen?
Yeah, I think you do.
Ted, was it Swati or something like that was doing that?
So the thing that's interesting here is that I wonder, I mean, how much of this is downstream tech firms, right? Like other AI SaaS firms using these tools through APIs, driving up these huge, token costs. Because I'm seeing in, kind of, we'll call it regular enterprise users, they work the way they work, right? I mean, if they're adding more work or they're lightening workloads, right? Like I don't see anybody, or I'm not saying there's nobody, but extremely tiny percentage of people who are now like generating 10 times their own workload, right? That just doesn't work in enterprise environments, primarily because, all the dependencies and codependencies with all the different systems up and downstream. So even if you built your SAP ABAP program 10 times faster, it would just sit around for 3 weeks while everyone else is building theirs, right? Like, you just wouldn't get tested in time. It's not going to get tested 10 times faster, deployed 10 times faster. So I wonder how much of this is just tech firms, dry, in this, whatever they call that circular tech diagram, right? Where they're all,
oh yeah,
that thing, whatever they call that thing. Like, I wonder how much is that actually.
Yeah.
We'll say one thing with this is you still can't do a lot of things inside Claude Code, or, well, maybe Claude Code, but more like Opus, Sonnet, ChatGPT, all these types of things. It wants the home runs. So it wants to generate your code. And then you take your data set with your code in Colab, where you have, on my TPU, it's like 170 gigabytes of RAM. And then that's where the bulk of the time, if I'm doing reinforcement learning, 50 episodes, if it's taking me like 20 minutes, but it doesn't want to do all that routine stuff yet. I don't know if we're going to see it this year. I heard of one service that you could do that as far as training your model, where it would send it over from the LLM into some notebook and do that for you. But yeah, there's still chief limitations in that you're going to have to use, Colab or VS Code or whatever you use to train separately, from this is just generating your core code.
Yeah.
Hey, Jerry.
It would tie up their servers too much.
I'm trying to understand what this leaderboard is. So is this representing, we've got developers that are paying some sort of fixed amount per month, and it's using an API underneath of Claude Code, and this is how much the API costs are? Is that what that's saying?
Well,
it says some users, it doesn't say some users are spending. It says some users are costing.
Yeah.
Because they're generating, like if it's tech companies generating, who are coding other apps and solutions, if they're, generating, whatever, trillion tokens through their API calls, with these products, and they're paying a fixed price, that they've signed a contract for, but, Cursor or whoever doesn't have an unlimited spigot with, OpenAI or anyone else, then they're generating, then the vendor is generating this impossibility cost curve without recouping the revenue.
Yeah.
And they have to put governance on.
It's got it when you get kind of unlimited use for a fixed price, you're going to get some users.
You're going to get rent seeking.
I'm surprised actually Warren doesn't show up here somewhere on this list from the way he's described the way he uses them. But he's not here to defend it, so
yeah, we shouldn't beat him up too much, Roger, when he's not here.
100 quadrillion token calls.
Yeah, well, somebody remember to ask Warren that sometime. Just how many tokens have you smoked through this week? All right, let's move on. That was a good point, though.
The last thing I'd stick in there is that, at least from what I've seen, for a business, the cost of using Claude Code versus the benefit that it provides is the benefit is so huge. They're going to be able to raise the per developer cost a lot before it doesn't make sense. I feel like these are.
Can they do that in a competitive market, though?
As long as everybody is, and it depends what's driving it. If the cost to provide the service is higher than what they're charging right now, yeah, I think they can. But you're right. As long as it stays competitive, if they're just trying to make too much money, too much profit, then yeah, there'll be pressure to
I
keep
mean,
it
what
in.
is interesting is we do have developer, end user, and we'll call it system integration unit economics, right? Like those exist, right? Like, so if you are a Microsoft, VS enterprise, blah, 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 right? You pay $3,000 as a developer or whatever, two to $5,000, depends on the class of enterprise bells and whistles you add to it for a developer to have access to everything in the Microsoft stack, right? Like you can do anything you want from any of the tools, any of the sites, any of their bug labs, any of that stuff. Gets, you name it. And so that number can't go to 20,000, right? Like, or, like it can't jump up some insane number of 5, 10x, because companies aren't going to, increase that cost. I don't think, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense at scale. Maybe they'll do it for a few super developers, but I can't see it do it for, like JP Morgan or whoever, any large organization do it for, the hundreds of thousands of tech developers that they have and contractors. I mean, that's an interesting dynamic too, is how contractors fit in this, because
I see the turning point with all this, especially for OpenAI, who has a ton of users that just use it for general use, is if the base model doesn't keep getting better, and hence they don't have to sink in more and more money into like future models, that they have something that's fixed like that. And then, same thing with Anthropic, like just your basic programming model that they don't have to spend a lot of time and money on, that just, they just don't have to, they'll start recouping some of the costs that way, I think.
Yeah, let's see if they have anything more that might help us here. Okay. So no, nothing more on that. They did. Sorry about that. So if you guys had any more thoughts on the other cost type things, I think we're through their section of it. Like I said, it went through and pretty heavily edited their slide deck here. So, all right. Failing that, then, I thought this was interesting. Just like what? Browsers become the latest AI battleground. I hadn't even given this a thought. I don't know if anybody else has. Obviously the interfaces that we use via the browsers and things like that do that, but this slide seemed to imply that, they're actually building things into browsers, and I'm a little shocked that this is occurring, and I didn't know about it. I guess probably because
I use Perplexity a lot, and they have a browser called Comet, which is their I don't know, Firefox. I haven't looked it up, but I some kind of open source Firefoxy kind of knockoff, and it's good. I mean, am I using it for traditional browser work? No, of course not. But for doing the Perplexity work, it seems to work pretty well. At some later point, when if you want me to present something one day, I can kind of demo a few of those. But I've definitely used it, and I use it all the time. And then I think the Chrome thing's feels clunky. There's something about the way it's almost like Microsoft in those days when they were trying to like become an internet company. You know what I mean? And you were they were like dragging you through Internet Explorer, and it was just but like Microsoft apps couldn't connect to it. I mean, it's very clunky, and there's a clunkiness to Chrome, Gemini, and Notebook to some degree.
Well, I think the biggest example of this has been the Google search. So right now I can get lightning fast. I've shifted some of my ChatGPT workflow to Google search because it answers with Gemini, and they're short, super fast.
100%.
And a lot of my tasks just need to be good enough, but I don't know if it's saving. So if you go to gemini.google.com, I have a history there. So that's the only downside that I found of using Gemini within Google search.
So I put this note on the bottom there. are they using the browser as a gateway drug? You know, I mean, they give you this kind of facility when the browser is, and then you kind of get stuck, if you will, into a particular brand of models and things like that. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I think many people, I use chat inference, I use playgrounds, I have used API, but it's just too slow when new models come out and I have to change the settings, and it's just not a fast interface.
Yeah, I'm thinking for more the not as technically advanced as most of the people here are, but if, you know, just if we go back to the days, you know, when the browsers first came out and things like that, those of us who were in tech, you know, said, okay, this is kind of cool and things like that. But to the end user, it was like a sea change, right? My God, I don't have to, you know, I can just ask it questions and things like that, or I could search things easily and all that. That was my, you know, point about the gateway drug, if you will. Will these companies start bundling all these little features down into their browsers and things like that, their tools, so that they become the easiest way for the non-technical user to try to get to all these things? And, you know, if you're already using Chrome or something like that, and it just some sort of, you know, like they say, Claude for Chrome and things like that, it's just sort of a plug-in type thing, or you just click a button and it happens, or pay $5 a month, that sort of thing. I don't know.
I mean, it feels like the browser wars-ish again,
Yeah,
but not the same intensity, but sort of, you know, but it's there right now.
Yeah.
If you look at like Google, what they've done with like their suite is you can access through Colab, Excel, Docs. It's hard to get rid of these where it says Ask Gemini or like the AI logo, that type of stuff. So they definitely have an advantage with that, I think.
Yeah.
It is clunky though, because it feels like, my sense with Google is like Microsoft went through this, for those of you who remember, like 25 years ago with the original moving from ASP to .NET with all the widget garbage back then. If you remember that, which just was like awful. I mean, it was what they had, so everyone had to use it, but it was, you know, it just was suboptimal. And Gemini everywhere, as was just described, feels that way, because sort of like Ask Gemini this, and it's like, where's this aggregating when I'm like touching Gemini from 30 different parts of the Google sphere, right? You know, it's like I'm looking at my maps on my phone for something personally, and then I'm using maps at work, and sometimes like it follows both, and I'm like, well, how did that happen? You know, is that like internal Google open auth that I don't know about, or what? You know, obviously I'm logged into both or something. So
yeah, I think a lot of people are using, and I do this too. Like I have a private Chrome for one account for my Chat GPT, so it doesn't get confused with my other Gmail accounts in others, you know, standard Chrome. And then I can use Safari for my other personal account.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm using Safari Chrome mostly, but to separate the accounts with Google, it's troublesome if you have multiple addresses in a single browser type.
So I think Jerry's comment about, we're not talking about power users here. You know, I suspect that there's like some very non-negligible percentage of users who are going to use whatever browser was pre-installed and had a shortcut on the desktop when they bought their PC. You know, call it 30%. And if you consider that by next year, the LLM, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever that's in your browser will give you the option to store your credit card. And when you ask it, like, where's a good place to buy running shoes? And it gives you recommendations. And then you say, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Go buy that. That's why everybody wants to be, you know, getting this share of the browser market.
Yeah. That's kind of that browser gateway drug comment. When I read through this, I kind of got like, yeah, they're trying to lock you in here, or you know, get you to buy into whatever their world is and things like that. But
And
yeah,
another big thing too with like ChatGPT and Anthropic is they can't access Amazon in specific, like the
No.
pages, because that's how Amazon generates a lot of their web traffic.
mhm.
So I think with Google, like Gemini, you can access YouTube links, but right now you can't. The last time I checked with ChatGPT and Anthropic, and these
Yeah,
are
well,
That's a great point
services
because
that people
between
use.
Google, Apple, and Amazon, which are three massive consumer and traditional end user people that
mhm.
like Ted was talking about, they've created these firewalls, so to speak, um, to obviously until they either have their products or they charge their um, whatever their fee to get through. Um, that's really going to be this interesting constraint around all of them.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, I'm going to move us to the next slide. So this is when I looked at all this. This was kind of what popped to my mind. How are they making? I mean, they can look. You can only sink costs for so long, right? So where are they going to make the money? Search, of course, is an obvious thing, right? Companies will pay for search results and things like that. And now that is going to be, you're going to buy some sort of, package from a Google or somebody like that that will move your rankings up and various things like that, because that's kind of how they work. Those companies work and things like that. And this was kind of scary here, this similar web thing. Retail visits referred by ChatGPT now convert better than ever major other, marketing channel measured. So that is saying people, they don't read those articles or influencers and things like that. They're just going to go in there and do something, type something in their browser, and it's going to take them and say, hey, you need Adidas, this and this shoes or whatever, and things like that. So I thought that was, yeah. And, it's, I'm actually betting some of my money against certain companies and things like that based on this gut feeling I have. So if I'm not here, it's because I sold my computer gear. What's that?
I mean, isn't there a challenge here in that we've been, whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. Like we've been engineered into accepting this search field, and that you're going to have, like the real estate that we have in Google search, and with that comes its pile of ads and search results and indexed search results, and then prior to that, the billion cookies they all tried to install on our computers till that ended. I don't know. Is it clear that these GPTs real estate, like that relationship, which the last 4 years there's no ads in that, right? There's no what I would call uh, um, commercial rankings, that just sort of slamming that in is not going to start changing the end user behavior, because to me that's because think about it right now, we don't pay for Google's free, so we accept the trade-off as rent seekers, that they're basically pumping us full of whatever it is, 60 billion a quarter in search advertising. I mean, that's the economics. Are we saying they're going to charge us $5-10 a month and advertise? I don't know how the hell that happens.
Yeah, I don't think they'd make that charge, but I think somebody is going to be paying these companies. I mean, the last one I highlighted there where about ChatGPT recently implemented things. They're starting to sell essentially a ChatGPT that is going to do checkout and selling you stuff, right?
Well, the question is, are they selling it to you like a Shopify who doesn't run ads unless you are? I mean, like it's like infrastructure, like shopping infrastructure, or is it like a Google search environment which is giving you a bajillion ads? but you accept it because you're not paying. You're paying indirectly, right? You're paying,
Yeah.
through the channel. I just don't know how we're paying for paid, chatbots. Let's say we're going to pay to then also be advertised. I don't know how that. I really just
I've
don't
got
know
to
how
figure
that works.
they're going to build advertisement into that, and it's going to be like, how you get the short article, and then if you click the button right, you get the long article, which has all sorts of ads and crap in it. It won't be like that, but I would think, these things are going to be, hey, you want more information, and it potentially could be biased information, biased towards.
Yeah.
If you want to go out and buy, I don't know, a new computer or something, well, that's kind of a bad one. But let's say some things, a new pair of tennis shoes, right? They're all kind of the same, really. But will it, kind of bias you towards buying Nike versus, some other brand or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have this gut feeling, because everything else has always gone this way, that there is going to be this, money talks and type, thing going on.
It's just going to be a little weird. Like, I pay whatever it is, $7 a month to not get YouTube ads. But
I agree. I do too.
I look for a YouTube, through my Copilot, through Gemini, and it gives me an ad, even though I'm paying $7 to not get an ad. Like that starts, and I'm paying for the Gemini, right? Like, there becomes a certain perverse, like an inverted relationship there. Well,
maybe they will respect your thing if you're paying them already. So I don't know, but it just felt very like, oh, here we go again with down this advertisement toll road type thing, or whatever. Probably in a much better way, but also that means that since the AIs can see a lot more of that transaction, that means they have a lot more information about you and spending habits and things like that they can then be turned around and monetized. Again, my 2 cents. And here they say, well, you can do that, but you can't get away from Google search. I think that's true to some degree, but we had search engines before Google search was so dominant and things like that. So there's nothing that says that something else can't come along and, make the experience so good. And so my concern with these tools is it makes it so subtle that you're being marketed to and things like that. Because it's just responding to your query. I wanted to, find some information about shoes or something like that. And then it'll say, oh, let me rank them for you and do that. And maybe somebody's thumb is on the scale on those. So, but maybe I'm just being panicky. Okay. And this is kind of, I thought this was interesting. So where do answer engines, get their answers and things like that? ChatGPT still draws heavily from Google's index, but distributes attention differently throughout the web. Low-ranking pages also get visibility and things like that. So is this something else that these tools can then sell and, will ensure that you get so many impressions and things like that in a certain amount of time?
Another thing they're doing too, I have issues with my orc ID in standard, this is OpenAI, Anthropic generations, and I have to use deep research in both cases for it to pick up that and LinkedIn. Right now, I don't, it'll say something like it doesn't have access to LinkedIn on both of those, non-deep research type inquiries. So yeah, there are some sites that maybe are more costly, or I don't know what the deal is, that I can only gain information using deep research feature.
Yeah, I could see that, but I don't know. This thing here where it says the top domains cited across models are Reddit, Wikipedia, YouTube, Forbes, and things like that. Even these percentages are pretty low, which says there's a lot of diversity too going along. But it is. Reddit is not without its biases. Wikipedia isn't without its biases. YouTube is not without its biases and things like that. I mean, YouTube, I don't know about you guys, but every time I watch a video, every second one has not, even though I pay for the ad-free type thing, it still has the content creator putting ads and crap in the thing, right? So maybe because I go to like trading sites and things like that, they always do that. But anyway.
Hey, Jerry.
Yes, sir.
You know how does Google work when they're doing web searches? Is that typically through Google, and is that an API fee that they're paying?
You mean you're in YouTube or something like that?
No. Let's say you're in ChatGPT and you want to.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
But it's going to do a web search to answer your question, and then it'll kind of summarize and analyze the results, right? And then present.
Kind of integrate it together.
Summary to. Yeah. But on the back end, the access to the web search, was that Google that provided the web search? And if so, is that an API fee that Google's getting?
I would guess that, Google's got the biggest catalog or dictionary or whatever you want to call that, right?
Yeah.
Or the biggest search
Google index.
The index out there in the world, right? So I'm
not sure how it was monetized.
Yeah, I would think that would be obviously one way that they would monetize it. And that probably, I mean, if you go back to kind of what was the basic tenet? Was to index Google's basic tenet, back when it was Larry and Sergey, right, was like to index all the information in the world or something like that, or
Yep.
words to those effect. Now, I don't think the company's changed that, right? They want to index all the information in the world, and that includes the damn internet too. So and they're going to monetize it. They are probably the best that has ever been about monetizing that type of information. So
I've had searches.
Go ahead.
Kevin. This is with ChatGPT asking why can't it access my orc ID, and it says because it has JavaScript, and I was just assuming that it would be proficient across all types of languages. But like I said, with the base models, I've just had issues. And the only one that it universally likes is ResearchGate. Like if you publish papers, it doesn't like Google Scholar. But again, if you go into deep research, you can access a lot more, or it searches for more.
Is that the bias in the interface, or is that
Google
concerned about the data? Or
Google Scholar might be just the competition thing with OpenAI. And then I don't know, as far as some of these other languages, it was saying it didn't like Java or JavaScript, or it doesn't have the ability to access the JavaScript websites. So that seems like a huge issue, right? So, so again, in the
wouldn't that be a security thing? Maybe they don't want to go someplace and start, I don't know. Anytime you have a programming language, right, kind of embedded in all this, I've got to think a search engine is thinking, oh, what maliciously could this do? You know what I mean?
Well, if I can get to it through deep research, I think it's more maybe bandwidth or preferred sites, or just be careful, because I use 4 or 5 of my links in ChatGPT, and it's similar in Anthropic without deep research, and it says ResearchGate, and then it'll keep pulling from ResearchGate. But if I do like individually, if I do Google Scholar and then my orc ID and then LinkedIn all separately, it has issues with that. So I'm not quite sure if it's a competition thing, or like, how many tokens the standard models want to access. But, there's ways through deep research of accessing these types of sites.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that, because I've never really bothered to study it. I do know what exists. What you're talking about exists, but I don't know about anybody else. If anybody else has anything to add to that. Okay, so I'm going to move on then. We are actually making progress, and we're shifting gears here, just to move on their vibe shift. we are starting to see this as the companies start to move along and things like that. We're seeing lawsuits. Lawyers are getting in the way, and you know, and everybody. I think there's a couple of types of lawsuits. There's the one like in the upper left here, where the Times sues OpenAI and Microsoft over AI use of copyrighted work, because we all know if you ask it a question and it can find that information on some sort of New York Times sort of thing, it's going to include it, right? And it isn't going to pay attrition to New York Times or things like that. So there's that aspect. Then you also have music labels, because these various models and things like that are just sort of saying, screw that. I know, because music is one of the most copyrighted, maybe film is more copyrighted or heavily protected, but music is up there, and these guys are just, if they can learn what the music does, they can generate your voice in it, they can generate anybody's voice in it, and they're not going to pay a penny for essentially doing copyright infringement.
Yeah, I mean, typically, and this is a comment in the chat, you get what you pay for. So Gemini.google.com is always the worst for me. And then I use AI Studio, and then but I don't get deep research through AI Studio. But yeah, you can do deep research through Gemini.google, but I need to switch over to AI Studio to pay. And you can do that actually for free a little bit, but Gemini.google is typically the worst.
Okay. Yeah. So it is getting to the point, though, where the lawyers are getting involved in all of this. It was kind of kitschy and kind of cool first to have your content used, but now it's like, hey, you're using copyrighted or somehow legally protected sort of things.
OpenAI got the brunt of this because they were ahead and they were first.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens to the others, but it's kind of unfair to them. A lot of this stuff that has happened just because they had the working products, going back to 01 and, 4.0 before Gemini and Grok even had a decent model. So that's why I feel a little bad for OpenAI in this case, but, I think it'll be industry-wide, anything in the future next.
Okay. Yeah. And then Getty Images, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They are very litigious outfit. They always have been.
Well, yeah, because they're also an actual rights holder through their private equity, right? So they'll buy, whatever, X percentage of the Michael Jackson library or whatever, the Beatles or this or that. So this is their, it's like it's IP, right? Like that's how they're treating it.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, I am seeing companies starting to add, legal or third party at this point contracting to permanent legal expertise on this. Like, basically, I'm not an expert at this, but for better, without a better a description, the equivalent of like an AI legal rights support, right? And they really, and so I think this area gets very aggressive going forward.
Yeah.
Because it becomes a revenue, it becomes a P&L, right? It ultimately becomes a risk protection, revenue generating, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a movie buff, if you remember the second Back to the Future in 2015, they said there are no lawyers anymore. So, yeah, I think it will still be the case, but I think it'll lax in some of these areas where they were, like I said, hard on OpenAI.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think that just gives rise to a whole new legal frameworks and legal companies that deal in kind of this area, and maybe some of these old laws aren't going to hold up in the generative AI type world anymore.
What's actually the biggest
Jerry,
thing?
go to the next slide, because I think this whole thing is all going to be moot before we can even debate it.
And one last thing with that is that the biggest thing going on right now is the White House and the laws between state and the whole country, how AI gets jurisdiction will be in the future. That like trumps all this right now.
Okay. Let's go to this next slide, though, as Ted suggested here. They are saying they're going to collaboration. So I guess this is, they are going to be selling their works. I don't know how this is all going to work. Anybody have any knowledge or that sort of thing? They're going to license license this stuff at a very, very low
I do
cost?
know about the Condé Nast, living out here in the New York area. And so that was like that's a very, very big one. Because Condé Nast has, a huge, portfolio of publications and content, and it's they're called it's embedded rights, right? So when Giselle is a model for whatever Chanel, and it's in Vogue, that's like 3 rights right there, right? It's not just Vogue, it's not just her picture in Vogue, right? It's all the pieces, and maybe it's on Paris or whatever, like in the runway, right? So it's like 4 rights because they're all, because all those components are rights. So the Condé Nast one, I think, is sort of a landmark one, which it will be interesting to see because people have to get paid, right? Like that's the whole point, right? Yeah. It's like the talent isn't going to do anything for free / use my rights in any way you want just because it's cool. People aren't going to be creative slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, Hollywood has a ban on generating, other real humans' work, but that doesn't prevent them, I don't think, of creating their own generated actors and people getting behind this. And now, who knows?
No, it does. In the last SAG contract, it does. That was one of the big holdouts there. So they can't generate artificial actors.
Yeah, so I'm saying in the future we'll have generated actors that will know and come to love, and they won't even be real just because they can come out with 12 films a year. I don't know. But just figure the pace of AI and generated content.
Yeah. All right, let's move on there. What time are we at? We're at 15 after. Yeah, I have about 30 minutes. Should we go long or do we want to split or what do we want to do on this here? I don't know. Well, let me go. It might be longer than that.
I was going to say, can we trust the 25? So maybe we shouldn't.
What do you think, Ted? Go ahead.
I'll shut up, Ted. Don't worry. You can just say it, Aaron. Don't talk. I'm okay with that.
No, Aaron, I'm sure we all appreciate you.
Okay, don't worry.
Yeah. Well, we still have, if you look at the top, those are your categories. I skipped politics, duh. And I did a little bit in safety and a little bit in survey, and we're still in the industry ones. So
I think we'll probably want to talk about next year's predictions for a good bit. So I think we can safely say we'll wrap it up. This is the 3rd session. We'll wrap it up in 4 and then we'll be done.
Okay. All right. That sounds like a reasonable thing. And then we need to talk about what we're going to be doing after that. So let's kind of keep that in the back of our mind. This has sucked up, 6 weeks now or something with the holiday. So we're going to have to go back to the old stuff. But it's always, I find this report is just such a good thing to have discussions about. Anyway, let's see here. So they say they're going to bring 5 gigawatts scaling training clusters. So, I don't know what that trains with that much power. Hopefully it trains a lot. One of the things I saw somewhere the other day was that China, this may actually put China out in the lead because China apparently has huge amounts of solar power that they can, use at very, very low cost. So their costs per token or whatever sort of metric you're going to use. If their power costs almost nothing, then they'll be a lot cheaper, and you might just ship your model over to one of their servers or something like that to train it or do whatever you're going to do with it.
Yeah, the new standard that CES talk I put into the chat there with Jensen Huang is 10 trillion parameters. So some models are thought to be over 1, 2, or 3, something like that. Grok is supposed to be like 6. And basically Moore's law has significantly slowed down. So they've had to do chip co-design. So the whole thing, instead of replacing 1 or 2 chips a year, they've had to manufacture the whole, setup every year with co-design, because you can't double print transistors every other year now. So they have to do other things quickly.
Okay. Good to know. So this Duke study projects 76 gigawatts of new availability. I don't know if that's on a worldwide basis or if that's just in the US or what that is. That's a lot of power, but it's not for a worldwide sort of thing. It sounds a little low. I don't get what they're saying about that. Anyway,
yeah, like I said, the Jensen Huang thing goes into detail. They say they're cooling their servers at 45 degrees C water. So it's like 110 degrees. It's their servers are that efficient, to fit in certain size and, energy consumption limits too.
Are we talking something with an NVIDIA chip in it or something else?
Well, Jensen, this is all coming from Jensen's talk.
Yeah. So I guess I was assuming that was true. I just wanted to verify that. So, okay. But 45 is not exactly, I guess that's cool enough to keep the thing from melting and keep the performance up and things like that. But, it's interesting to see how much power we're going to consume making these things work. Okay. And then there are these big measuring contests. Is this referring to genitalia or I don't know, or something like that? I see that. They're talking about these massive clusters that are coming online here. And, look at these number of chips and teraflops and things like that.
That's the standard is flops.
Yeah, I understand. But teraflops up in that range, you're getting out there comparing to what we had. But 3.5 teraflops, that's a lot of ops. 550,000 chips. I don't know. But these are everybody's, frontier type clusters and things like that. Okay. And this is going to cause, NERC reported that electrical shortages could occur within the next 1 to 3 years in several U.S. major regions. DOE is warning of blackouts that could be 100 times more frequent by 2030 due to unreliability and new AI demand. Well, I happen to live in an area which is so freaking unreliable that I've spent lots of money putting batteries in my house. Now everybody else will have to go out and spend lots of money to put batteries in their house. So I'm going to invest in batteries for homes. Anyway.
Yeah, these Oracle OpenAI data centers are already being built in my hometown in Michigan. They have already started that process. It's like in rural, like a corn land in between 2 rural cities kind of thing. But yeah, it's a thing. It's happening.
Yeah. So how big are these data centers, Kevin? Do you know what their capabilities are?
I don't think they're for training for most of them. I think it's just for inferencing. And
okay.
Like the slide you had before with the that stuff, that's for training. And I think a lot of these will just be for local serving regions, like maybe a couple states or something like that.
Okay. But, there seems to be, with all these guys, what Gates is now looking at bringing 3 Mile Island back online or something like that. Some crazy things like that, that this is, as it says in this thing here, aging U.S. grid really can't handle that. I mean, this stuff needs to be put off in some sort of, data center that is modern data center, modern wiring, all that sort of stuff. And the electricity needs to come from, power needs to come from someplace close, and just data goes in and out, So, because the U.S. grid ain't going to handle it.
I agree with the distributed computing, and it just spreads everything out, because there's going to be rural parts of America that are significantly underserved, that their GPT responses will be faster and, probably accessibility to more features and models and bigger models, but for inference.
Yeah, but that's fine, right? It'll maybe get some more a few jobs and things like that in those areas, which heaven knows they need. And it'll also, take the load off your major population centers and things like that. So I don't know. That, in my mind, that's not a bad thing, So.
I mean, I do question sort of the linear growth processing model of, everything is hyper consolidated, right? It feels like when I first started in technology in the 90s, it was client server and everything was just being pulled out of these hyper consolidated mainframe, mid-range clustered environments into more distributed systems. And it seems like this sort of shift to a more localized computing, and they don't, no one talked about this, and I don't know if they even bring this up, but I mean, every client I'm working with is definitely putting LLMs, smaller ones, but LLMs in Docker and K8 environments, Kubernetes environments within their own compute. And so I just have to imagine, there's a shift here, or a balance, maybe call it a balance between massive consolidated, basically equivalent of cloud AIs, and more distributed use.
Okay. Let's see, where does this one go? Yeah. So just finishing up here on this, I just tried to put slides in that were kind of related. So Google has a PPA, power purchase agreement, from CSF to buy a greater than or equal to 200 megawatts coming from a fusion reactor. So they're not waiting for the future. They're gonna, or they are waiting for the future, but they're working with, what does it say, Commonwealth Fusion Systems or something like that, to get power. They're not going to be dependent on the grid, or put as much load on the grid and things like that. So this is probably a good thing, because anytime we put it on the grid, then all the legal issues with shipping power around the country and, sort of weirdness that is in the U.S., like Texas being on this super isolated grid. Are you guys aware of that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the Texas grid. I have family that lives in Austin, and when they had that snowpocalypse or whatever the thing, they lost power for 5 days. But just on the edge to the west, in El Paso, which happens to be, real close to New Mexico, they had power. And just on the far eastern side, in far eastern suburbs of Houston, they had power because they were wired to Louisiana. But the rest of Texas was essentially a black hole, and so, these guys going with something that isn't connected to the grid, in my mind, sounds like a really bright idea. Have something that's dedicated to your AI needs. And if you have some excess power and you want to sell it back to the grid, go ahead and do that. But your needs come first. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Roger.
Well, I was just going to say, so build the AI centers close to your source of power.
Yes.
And make sure that the source of power is a good baseline source of power.
Yes.
I'm not sure if solar power is a great choice for China for AI data centers, for instance.
Yeah, it may not be, but maybe they can use solar for other things other than, and then use their other stuff for, because they still burn coal and things like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I just put a link in. I mean, all the plants are going to be gas powered plants. I mean, because that's what you can bring online quickly. 1, 2, 3 years, and
Hmm.
the combined cycle ones can be 600, 800 megawatts to a gigawatt. And we obviously have, well, we already had pretty close to unlimited gas access, and now we have, I don't know, the 53rd state or whatever you want to call it going on. So, I mean, I just think, and the estimate is there's 200 natural gas plants that are targeted to come online between now and the end of 2030. So I just put the link in from from Yes Energy, which is one of the market kind of research companies that focuses on natural gas.
Yeah.
There
Well,
are more efficient architectures too, because like the Nemo 3, is using not transformers, but or diffusion. What's the other one? That are don't take they're not quadratic, they're basically linear in some of their
mhm.
operations. So as far as the software itself, it's yet to be seen what, if people are going to be switching over from transformers, which is quadratic, I think in training and at least training. And I think one other thing it's quadratic in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see if there's another slide on this here. Yeah, this is the other one here about China here. Um, so you can see the demands there. It's interesting that China consume more power
Generate more power.
or generate. Excuse me. Peak. Yeah, for peak electric. Yeah. Okay. Uh, it's interesting though this line here where it says, "While China must serve more demand." I think that's demand, Ted. I mean, Roger. I think that's demand here. This is peak
Oh,
electric
the
demand.
top numbers. Yeah. Sorry. The graph I think, says generation. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. But see, here's the difference. So China's look like this, right? It's going
yeah.
up. We're U.S. isn't doing too well, right? We're kind of flatlining there. Um, uh,
Yeah. But
so
why does China, if those are correlated, why does China have 10 times or 7 times more power generation than its demand?
yeah, well, part of that has to do. They have a lot more solar power, and maybe that isn't the right thing we would use, for this AI. But they have a lot more solar power than the U.S. does because it's not a political thing in most of the world except the U.S. And the U.S. it seems to be kind of a political thing, and that I think hinders us. It's not like we lack for spots for putting up solar panels and things like that, but we
Well, and
lack for
also
political
nuclear. I
will.
mean, you want to be really objective about it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, China does, we'll just say, stumbles their way a little more through gas plants
Hmm.
because their population politically responds kind of the way we respond to nuclear, right? Like because they've lived through all the air pollution and so on, and so they really struggle with that. But on the nuclear side, China slaps AP 1000 all day and night because the Westinghouse deal 25
Hmm.
years ago, where they're basically the global OEM for AP 1000s, and we're screwing around with some kind of goofball, it's like IBM PS2 version instead of just saying, damn it, just put Windows 3.1 and just jam it in everywhere,
Yeah.
and that's what they're doing, right? And we're like freaking out if someone says the word nuclear, we all just dive underneath the table. And China's, at France and Finland and Ontario, right, the biggest nuclear power plant reactor set on Earth is basically in Ontario, pumping all this energy to New England, keeping chunk of them warm, and giving Boston a lot of energy so they can do all their AI and stuff. So there is this cognitive dissonance, I think, with gas and nuclear. And that doesn't mean I'm not like pro solar or and wind and so on, but I mean, let's not pretend that solar and wind can defeat 100 AP1000 nuclear reactors and 500 combined cycle gas plants. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
you know
That's a good point.
And the truth is all the shitty wiring and all the terrible transmission that gets solved when you start slamming this many of them in, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to degrade your power distribution while you have the centralized power capacity, right? Like no one's going to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's like building a new house and putting coaxial in, right? No one's everyone's putting fiber in,
Yeah. Okay, let me just check and see if there's anything more on this. Oh no, so that was kind of it. So this is a really good place to stop, and I think we'll do that for tonight. And unless anybody has any issues with that, so I'm going to stop